Hello, everybody. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. We're going to talk recruiting for the next 30 minutes here. I'm joined by Brandon Speck and John Davis of the Daily Journal, and also Patrick Ochs of the Sun Herald. We identify John Davis as part of the Daily Journal family, but he is actually our sports editor of the Oxford Citizen. All four of us here are going to talk recruiting for the next half hour. Join us. Send us questions on Twitter. We'll check Twitter every now and then and try to answer a few of those the best that we can. But lots to talk about as we get closer and closer to signing day. Guys, how's everybody doing? Everybody's in different places. I'm down here in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. JD is in Oxford. Patrick right across I-10. If you listen to Sinquest Golson, that's I-10 east from Mobile, but I think we got him straight on that. It's really west out of Mobile. Over there in Biloxi Gulfport, and Brandon holding down the fort in Baldwin, I reckon. How is everybody?
Good.
Excellent.
I'm very good, and I guess Sinquest should have majored in geography, huh? Or he didn't major in geography.
I think Sinquest is just so happy to be here that he just was overcome with directions there. But he said
I'm kidding. He's oh man, funny.
He said he really enjoys walking from the hotel through the crosswalk to the convention center each day where they have meetings here at the Senior Bowl. And he's on that crosswalk and he looks over and he sees an interstate that says I-10 east to Pensacola and west to Pascagoula. He just got crossed up a little bit. He's happy to be close to home. So he's here. Cody Pruitt is here. They're the two Ole Miss representatives. Mississippi State actually has 4 players in the game after Blaine Clausell was added on Wednesday. They have Clausell, a late addition, an offensive line, and also Dylan Day, an offensive lineman, and 2 defensive linemen, Preston Smith and Caleb Ewells. But we're going to talk recruiting here. And Patrick, there's been a lot of conversation on this program the last few weeks about the likelihood that Leo Lewis, an Ole Miss commit, might flip to Mississippi State. I know you have some recent information there talking with his coach. What does he have to say?
Yeah, Leo's kind of an interesting character in this whole recruiting game where he doesn't talk to the media. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. I called his coach Monday or Tuesday just to kind of catch up on Leo, and essentially his coach said, at first the recruiting game was kind of fun and everything, but as it wore on, you hear this a lot with a lot of these elite kids. They just get tired of answering the phone. They turn it off. His coach joked that in the fall, Leo might have gone through 3 or 4 different phones, and at one point, he wasn't even able to get in touch with his star linebacker. If you think about it, and I had somebody kind of explain it to me the other day like this, you have a big kid, whether he's committed or not, he goes on a visit, let's say to Ole Miss or State, wherever, and after that visit, he's going to have everybody from each major newspaper in the state calling him. If he's committed to Ole Miss, he's going to have Ole Miss's beat writers calling him. You're going to have State's beat writers calling him, any national guy. So who knows how many phone calls he's getting. Plus, you have the other coaching staffs trying to check up on him. Hey, how'd it go? Hope you had a good time, but not that good of a time, kind of thing. And heck, I hate it when my phone rings 5 times in a day, and it irritates me sometimes. I can't imagine being a 4-star linebacker with everybody in the country after you. And so that's kind of, I think his silence has kind of fueled the rumor mill in a way.
So you think the silence maybe lends him more toward a flip, or is the silence good news for Ole Miss?
Well, I think the silence is what it is. You don't really know which way he's going. It's interesting, as Coach said, heading into his senior year, his junior year, Ole Miss, he said, was the first offer the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. State offered a few hours later. Then all of a sudden, within 5 days, he has 5 SEC offers. And his coach was saying that before everything got started, his really only connection to a college was Mississippi State. There was he had a coach his freshman year who went to State. A couple of his buddies are going to State or went to State. Brookhaven had a couple players that played at State. So he really only had that connection to Mississippi State, which has kind of lent itself, I guess, through the process. I've always heard that Mississippi State was the biggest player for him. And so that's kind of where it comes down to it. To be honest, I don't, it'll be telling as long as he shows up on his visit, maybe where he stands with the Rebels or where the Rebels stand with him, rather.
Well, I'll tell you what, you were talking about all those phone calls that these 4-star, 5-star recruits get. Some of them enjoy that, I think. Now, he's shut it down. He's obviously not one who's enamored with the attention of recruiting, but some guys really enjoy that and play to that. I know Laquan Treadwell was a guy who put out a lot of pictures on Twitter and social media and seemed to really enjoy that process. JD, big weekend coming up for Ole Miss, man. What are some of the highlights of this weekend?
Well, if it comes to pass, and I think you got to take it. This is a guy that is the opposite of Leo Lewis. This is C.C. Jefferson. He's coming up here on an official visit because this is Ole Miss's big weekend. You got DeMarcus Lodge and Leo's supposed to be up here, and you got all these other committed guys like Sweeney and Willie Hibbler, and the guys that are committed to you right now, and then the guys that you want to kind of close with, Kendrick Norton, a defensive tackle from the Jacksonville area. I mean, these are the scheduled guys, okay? So let's say you have them all together, and it's 20, 25 kids because this is your big weekend. And you have C.C. Jefferson come up on an unofficial visit. That right there, when you have the number one defensive end, in the nation, along with some people think Coward as well. But the point is, if you have him there, you have Leo Lewis, you have DeMarcus Lodge, who a lot of people think is the best wide receiver in this class, definitely a top 50, 60 overall prospect in the nation. It's going to be an interesting weekend, and I think this is Ole Miss's final push to finish up with the guys that they've got committed, to kind of rein them in, to kind of convince them, hey, we still love you. We've loved you for 11 months or 2 years or whatever, and then to finish up with guys that they need, that they need to get a commitment from, or they need to get a better read on going into signing day. And I still go back to defensive linemen. They need to get at least one defensive lineman, in my opinion, going into signing day or on signing day. In Jefferson's case, he's going to make a decision on signing day, but they need to get a defensive lineman to kind of round out this class. I think a wide receiver would be great, especially if it's Lodge and Van Jefferson decommitted. That's kind of some other stuff I know we were going to talk about from 2 days ago, but I think they could live. I think they could live without a wide receiver in this class. With DK Metcalf coming in next year, a big class in general, and then just the guys that they've got on roster, I think they can live with that. I don't think you can put a premium. I don't think you can just say, if you've got a great offensive lineman or a great defensive lineman, you can go a year without having one. I do think the Jones defensive tackle, DJ Jones, is a great get, so that they at least have that. But I think we've seen how important offensive and defensive linemen are in this conference and just in general. So I think that's the last thing I think they need to get heading into signing day.
Hey, Brandon, I want to come back to you in just a second. I know, Patrick, you've got a meeting you got to scoot down to the office for. I don't know how long you can stay with us, but just wanted to talk about the coast in general. And now that you've been transplanted there with a wife who's from there, getting to know the area, where does Ole Miss fit into the coast picture of recruiting? And who are some of the names down there, maybe not involved with Ole Miss, but who are some guys getting a lot of recruiting attention on the coast this year?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing. At least this year, Ole Miss doesn't have a lot of kids that they're in on or that are committed. You have a couple kids for Pascagoula that are going to Louisville and State. You have kids in Southern Miss, really. Obviously, Southern Miss were right in their backyard, so they hit the coast pretty hard. There's a lot of kids, I think, in the coming classes that Ole Miss probably should have some interest in moving forward. Kid like Tim Jones at Biloxi. You got a couple kids at St. Stanislaus. No surprise, they throw the ball around quite a bit. Miles Brennan just broke Dylan Favre's state record. He can throw it around quite a bit. They got a couple receivers, a couple other kids there. It seems like in the future they might have some interest, but at least this class coming up for 15 with signing day, what are we, 2 weeks away? A little over 2 weeks away. They don't have really a strong footing, at least football-wise, on the coast. That's something I would expect maybe changes a little bit. The coast is an interesting dynamic. You have a lot of different areas coming in here trying to get some kids. Like I said, Louisville has a commit from down here. Missouri has Rashad Floyd. He played quarterback at Gulfport. You look on the different lists. He's a little further down some of these prospect rankings, but he's a good athlete. He's a great basketball player. I moved over to the sports side of things from news a little late in the football year to see a lot of these kids in person. I covered St. Stanislaus a couple times in person, a couple other teams, Ocean Springs. But Rashad Floyd's another great athlete. You got a kid like Jonathan Nance already enrolled at Southern Miss. So you have a lot of kids that are going all over the place. For whatever reason, Ole Miss maybe it's the distance. Ole Miss just hasn't had a lot of strong footing down here. Sinquez Golson is obviously probably the biggest one last couple of years. That they've got. You talked about Sinquez over at the Senior Bowl. He was pretty ecstatic to only be probably 45 minutes away from his hometown. After the practice, he had a kind of a watch party. He had a group of cousins and friends, probably I don't know, maybe 8, 10, 12 people over there that he was chatting up right after the practice. Distance I'm sure plays a big part in it. There's a lot of talent down here. JUCO kids. There's a lot of JUCO kids that maybe that next step end up at Ole Miss. So, as far as Ole Miss specifically is concerned, they don't really have a strong footing down here, and maybe they should. A couple weeks back, I talked to a couple the Laurel coach. They have a couple kids that are pretty high up on the rankings. You got Omar Bayless. You got the kid that Ole Miss has committed for the next class. His name's escaping me right now, but that's Cooley. Yeah, Cooley. So that's a little further north than where we are, but that's maybe the most southern Mississippi kind of kid that Ole Miss has right now. So.
Well, Patrick, I know you've got a meeting. Hang out with us as long as you like. But if you exit the call, that's fine too. I'm really enjoying your weather on the coast.
Hey, real quick, Patrick, go back to a couple years ago when you were still here. We were together at the Eagle, and remember when we had Tito Wyndham, and you did the interview of him in the combine at the Southern Elite Combine. Do you remember exactly what he said in regards to Ole Miss? Because I know he ended up at Oklahoma, and I thought he was a good player, and obviously Ole Miss was looking at him. But do you remember specifically what he might have said in that interview?
Honestly, I don't specifically remember what Tito had said. I think it was a little bit of a surprise that Oklahoma, came in and got a kid like Tito, who I don't think was really high on a lot of recruiting rankings and whatnot. I looked him up maybe a week or two ago, and I don't think he really played this year. I think he may have redshirted. But, that's another area where, like I said, here's Oklahoma coming into Mississippi and getting another kid that, maybe would have stayed inside the state otherwise. I don't remember Ole Miss having a lot of interest in him. He was kind of a kid that was a little surprising, even at that combine to be up there. I think he maybe had come up with a couple friends to check out the area and maybe took a tour of the campus on an unofficial. But that was about the extent of, I think, the interest. To be honest, I don't even remember if Ole Miss had a ton of interest specifically in him. It might not have been mutual. He might have just been, hey, checking it out to see if maybe he could stay a little closer to home.
Brandon, tell us about Arminty Linton a little bit. I know we talked about him, tried to have him on the program. Maybe we can get a recruit or a coach to come on with us here in the coming weeks, maybe even after signing day for a little sifting through the ashes there. But, it seems like I've heard his name in some recruiting chatter in terms of this gem in the class, just an athlete that maybe a lot of people are overlooking because he's coming from a smaller school. What kind of player is Ole Miss getting there?
One very ready to play. I think he's a guy that comes in and plays very, very soon. I mean, he's not a guy you got to worry about flipping. He's coming for sure, and he's been on the recruiting trail pretty hard himself. So he's just a guy with a lot of tools. And I think he's picked up his 4th star. JD, is that right? So. I mean, he's just he's a guy that they kind of jumped on earlier, kind of pulled a Dan Mullet on and went and found him. And I don't know if they didn't find him, but they've kind of got him like one of those guys that nobody really expects to come in and be a star. But I think he's got all the tools to come in and be a star. I mean, he plays everything at Walnut. It's a 2A school, so you don't want him out there in basketball breaking a leg, but assuming he gets there in one piece, I think he's a guy that comes in and competes for playing time as a freshman. Now, I know he was at a basketball game at Baldwin this week, and Memphis was there. Memphis football was there talking with him. So it's not over. I don't think they'll lose him, but there are more people jumping on his bandwagon.
Well, you say you don't think he'll flip, but what might cause him to flip, or what would interest him in other schools? What might he see in a Memphis that he doesn't see in Ole Miss?
Maybe quicker playing time, I guess, would be the only thing. But as JD knows, because he was there that night, he got the infamous land shark photo with him and Jay Johnson from Bruce. I just don't think anything could make him flip. I mean, unless somebody comes in and says, we guarantee you'll play right now. I mean, that could happen. Or if a guy like Brady Davis gets a hold of him and convinces him to go to Memphis, a guy real passionate about Memphis football, I don't think he goes anywhere. I think he's a guy that's going to come in and surprise some people in camp.
Well, when you talk about the athletes, you usually think defense. Where does he project at Ole Miss, do you think?
JD, you're probably more equipped to answer that than I am. I think they put him at safety.
Oh yeah, no, he's a safety. He's the next safety. I think that the idea is for him and Hampton to be together in tandem. You're losing Cody Pruitt. He kind of helps fill that void, adds to the dynamic back there. And you talked about getting a 4-star. He ended up being number 140 on the last 247. Their 247 projections. A lot of the 250, 300 lists, depending on what service. 247 does a 247 list, and Amani Linton was 140. And this is the nation now, ladies and gentlemen. This is a walnut product being ranked 140th best prospect in the entire nation. I mean, there are 140 kids playing high school football here at Oxford and Lafayette. So that's a tremendous honor. I hope he's able to live up to it. I mean, there's a certain amount of pressure involved there too, but. Going back to your question, he is a safety all the way. He's going to be the guy that's playing center field, getting interceptions, being able to cover tight ends or bigger wide receivers out of the slot. And I think, and I haven't seen him play other than just video. I know Kedrick Story out of Ripley, our Ripley paper, has seen him play. He may be better suited to answer this question, but the physicalness of it. He's got the size. I would think he's a good tackler, but I don't think the run stopping is as important as just his overall athleticism in the overall backfield area.
If he's back there in the back end, is he going to be fast? Does he have the speed to cover? I mean, we've talked about his athleticism. One of the things that I hear the NFL folks questioning Cody Pruitt about right now is speed. Nobody is questioning his physical nature and his football IQ, but does Linton have the speed to cover and go side to side and do some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, he's a 4-5 guy. I mean, he's a 4-5 guy, and like JD said, that his athleticism adds to that. I mean, he's got enough speed, but his athleticism takes over, and he's a hawk. I mean, and when you throw in and factor this in, he has nowhere near reached his peak. I mean, here's a guy that's, I'm not going to call him a late bloomer, but he's not an early bloomer. I mean, he got here and started playing football when he got to Mississippi from Chicago, which has been 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So he's around the game. But here's a guy who, he's from a small school, so obviously they don't have all the tools that larger schools have as far as, weights and programs, and they don't have the time a college team does. When this guy gets in there and puts on the weight and figures out the SEC game, and he's got, I'm telling you, he's just got all the ability in the world, and when the intangibles are factored in, he could be a star if he lives up to it. That's always a question mark, but I think he can. He's a great kid too.
I was going to say real quick, I know he's got the size. I've seen him close in person, and he's got the size. He's very well spoken. I was impressed with the way he gave an interview and the way he handled himself. So those are kind of check marks on my part. Cody Pruitt came from Silver Bay Academy. He was from a small school. I mean, it's almost like they really have the same story. Cody Pruitt originally is from Louisiana, was displaced by Hurricane Katrina, moves up to Silver Bay. He's not originally from Bay Springs, plays at a smaller school, even smaller than Linton, but very athletic. I think he's got enough athleticism to be exactly like Cody Pruitt in the sense of covering guys and being able to, when the ball's in his hands, to make an interceptions. A lot of defensive backs or safeties in general have trouble with that. So I think Linton will come into play there. Now, Does he have NFL speed? I don't know. I mean, the 40 that you run at college or at these camps are a lot different than what Parrish is dealing with down at the Senior Bowl. But I do think he's going to has the ability to be a very, very good college player. And with the right coaching and the right ability and the right taking to the strength program, hey, he could be an NFL guy long term.
Hey, guys, we've talked about offensive line in this Ole Miss class a lot. There were some interesting comments on a blog in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a few days ago by a Georgia commit, said he's recently received an offer from Ole Miss. JD, I know you read this as well. You know, what was interesting about it, what wasn't so much that a Georgia commit had received interest from Ole Miss as much as it was this kid's perspective, his take on the Ole Miss situation and why they were coming after him now. He speculated that the Ole Miss coaches could be concerned that they might lose one or two of these offensive line commits. And, you know, what's your take on that?
Well, I think when Drew Richmond, and let's go back all the way to September. Now, he even told us, that I was at his commitment ceremony, he even said that he was probably going to look at taking some visits. And I think when you start to take some visits, you know, it's one thing to say in September and go, okay, all right, he's going to take some visits. But when you actually go and start to look around and it's January, I think that's part of it. I think when you have one of your commitments kind of looking around, you know, do you need to look around? And then the reality of the situation is, are you looking around because you still need one more tackle or one more guard or whatever the case may be? We've talked about Patterson and how good he is. We've talked about that they have 4 offensive linemen. 3 of them are tackle prospects. But do you want to go out and get that next great offensive lineman? And that's where it comes into play there. I think Ole Miss, again, at one time, being fairly recently, was looking to get one more offensive lineman. I'm not so sure that is exactly the case right now. I think at the end of the day, if signing day is here and it's pretty close, they're going to be happy with this offensive line class. But you also have to kind of look around, and that's kind of what, you know, it was interesting in this case. That's what the recruits are starting to realize is like, okay, Ole Miss is still looking around. They're still looking to get a tackle. They're still looking to get a guard. And I think that's what you do. You got to look at what your needs are, where you're really at, and what you can get from it from a this late in the game type standpoint.
Well, that is interesting. I didn't check. I was down here. The class is back in session now. Did Javon Patterson enroll?
He's supposed to. I actually haven't checked. That's probably something good for me to do. I could probably text Kyle or one of the people at Ole Miss to find out. But that's what he was supposed to have done based on our conversation, and then just, you know, after the Army game, that he was still planning to be at Ole Miss. He signed all the paperwork that day in front of my eyes. So I haven't heard anything that would lead me to believe he didn't do it. But at the same time, for me to say he has would be wrong because I don't know that for sure.
Well, we'll check on that and make sure. But Javon Patterson, just a really big get. Of course, you want all you can get, man. You want to keep Drew Richmond in the fold. You want to keep Leo Lewis in the fold, and we'll just see. What is 2 weeks from yesterday, right? Is signing day? Is that right? Am I looking at the calendar straight?
That's correct.
Yeah. How do you think? How many spots now does Ole Miss have left at this point?
2. I mean, 3 at the most if you count a sign-in-place type situation. I mean, they've had 3 transfers. There's no more transfers. The goal was to sign between 17 and 20. 20 was going to be the high water mark. I've been told that there's 18 spots. So they got 16, so that's 2. I think 1 is a sign-in-place for sure. So 2 to 3. And really and truly, there's only a couple guys that would really round it out to, like I said, I mean, 1 more defensive lineman. Would they take 2? Absolutely. But 1 more defensive lineman, maybe 1 linebacker and 1 wide receiver is really what you're looking at here. You're set at running back. You're set at quarterback. You're pretty much set at offensive line. The goal was to get 4. You got 4. Safety, Linton was the guy. They got him. Set at corner with Ordway. I mean, there are certain positions that they're already set with. You just got to kind of finalize it out, and then your numbers are right there. I mean, it's really as neat and orderly of a class that I've been around in several, if not the most.
Well, I'll tell you what. With with Ole Miss having fewer numbers, fewer scholarships to offer, that it really has seemed to be I guess, an absence of drama in this class. I mean, we're coming off the big Chris Jones ordeal. I guess we're 2 years removed from that now. Really, I mean, Brandon, let's go to you. In terms of drama, is there going to be any before signing day? What are you hearing?
Leo Lewis and C.C. Jefferson. I think C.C.'s going to sign that day. But outside of those two, I mean, and I don't think Jefferson's going to Ole Miss. JD, I think you agree with that. I think he goes to Florida. But I think those two are the two you got to watch, with Jefferson and Lewis to be the only two surprises. Outside of that, I don't think any of the current guys in place are going to go make a change.
You don't think Jefferson to Auburn with Muschamp there? Did they make up any ground?
I don't. I mean, I think Norton and Jefferson both go to Florida. JD, what do you think?
Well, now Norton has Auburn the last weekend. If I had a gun to my head and pick right now before his Ole Miss visit, I think he goes to Miami. He's not going to go to Florida, I don't think. Jefferson is unpredictable in the sense that he says exactly what he needs to say to the person that is associated with that school and the fan base, if you will. He's kept everybody open. He's kept everybody in the loop. He's kept everybody on top. That's exactly what his coach said he was going to do, and he's lived it up. And he understands where he sits in this thing. This is where he's got the ultimate power, if you will, in deciding and where he, as soon as he signs, the easiest way to put it, I'll quote his coach, as soon as he signs, he becomes another pawn in the system. Up until that signature goes on the paper, he knows he's got the power to wield. I can tell you this, Ole Miss is in it. I don't think that there's any doubt that there is serious consideration on his part, and Ole Miss has hit it as hard as they can. My gut tells me that he will not be an Ole Miss Rebel, but it's not because that they haven't tried. And if he is, I will eat crow, but I think at the end of the day, I think it'll signify the ability to finalize and push all the way to the end, and another great job in recruiting if they get him. A great job in general to be that close. Auburn is in the mix more so than they've ever been because of Will Muschamp. That's an absolute truth. I don't think Auburn is in the mix at all if he's not there. And then LSU has always been kind of high on his list, and I got that from Larry Bluestein of the Miami Herald, who has covered him for the last 4 years. And he said Jefferson had talked about LSU with him for at least 3. With Ed Orgeron coming on board and him already seeing Ed Orgeron, I keep thinking that is in a wild card situation there. When Ed Orgeron can walk in and say, I coached Cortez Kennedy, Russell Maryland, Warren Sapp, and I was around those guys, even The Rock. I know he wasn't a pro football player, but I mean, just that name appeal. When you have that and on your resume and can say that makes a big impact with a lot of these kids.
Well, I'm calling for
Go ahead, Brandon.
I'm calling for the surprise picks there as far as their choices, but I do hear through the grapevine that Ole Miss's last shot at recruiting some of these bigger guys like Jefferson and Norton is they're going to call a surprise recruiter in Chad Kelly, who's going to do some convincing.
Brandon, you're bad. You're bad.
47 style.
Hey. Have either of you guys heard of any kind of impact with what we're a week into Ed Orgeron's return to the SEC with his announcement at LSU? Any kind of impact there for LSU recruiting that y'all have heard about?
I can tell you that he made a huge impression with Prince Tega Unogo, who he saw first. That was he went from seeing the kid to having him come on an official visit last weekend. So yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, it's made a huge impression on the kids that he's seen. I think again, it's going to be a bigger impression as it goes on. But the thing about Ed Orgeron is he walks into a room and he dominates the conversation. He's able to have such an initial impression, and I think that there's other coaches that just don't have that. And like him or not, he's just a big guy that has a big personality about him, and I think he's just able to kind of make an impression to where you can't get it out of your mind as easily as some other coaches.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're out of time, folks, and Prince has got a story that we really didn't talk much about on this program. We will pick it up again next week. We thank you for being with us, and as always, the replay will be right there on the blog at InsideOleMissSports.com. Lots of good stuff there. Lots of good stuff also at OxfordCitizen.com. So, hey, come join us next week.